and welcome to another episode of Buzzy B. Esther. In this episode, it's my first part of my story series, and I'm going to tell you all about how my health problems started at birth with a benign tumor in my wrist, which is why I have a huge scar, have another small scar on top, and another zigzag scar, even though you can't really see them that well at this point. But I just want to tell you a little bit about my background and also, what's the deal with all of this. And next week I'm going to get into why benign tumors even happen according to medical medium. So stay tuned. So I'd like to start out with my background, and one fun fact about myself that is pretty interesting is I was actually adopted by my cousin. So yes, I said that right, my cousin adopted me. So my biological father was one of 8, and he was on the younger end of that time span, and then the oldest of those 8 was Mary Clemens, and she is the mother to my father. Anytime I say mother, father, I'm always talking of my adopted mother, father. I was adopted when I was 18 months old, so I really don't know anyone else as far as my parents, and I would not change anything for the world. Like, they have been the best parents to me. I've had a great life, so, I really appreciate everything they've done for me. So I want to talk a little bit about mental illness, too. So the reason my biological parents, could not take care of me is because they were sick with mental illnesses. It prevented them from being fit parents, and they could not take care of me, and I have a biological brother as well, and he was also adopted, but he was actually adopted by some foster parents, because when I was born, Anne Clemens was still around, and she's a great-grandmother, through the adopted side. So it's a little confusing when I go back and forth between biological and adopted, but basically my grandmother took care of me until I was adopted, and when my brother was born, he was not, my grandmother was no longer around, so he went into the foster system and he was adopted by his foster family. My biological parents met in the hospital, and they were on government funds most of their life, and they were very smart is what everyone tells me, because I am in the family. We still know a lot about the biological parents. So my biological father actually went to Williamson Trade School, which is really hard to get into. And my biological mother went to Penn State main campus. First year, got in, she was pretty bright. So even though they were both bright, they kind of got into drugs and things. And I don't know what kind of drugs, but I was always told that the mental illnesses developed after they started taking these drugs, which I only had to assume was probably LSD in the 70s and stuff. I'm going to actually talk a little bit next week, too, about psychedelics and mental health and what medical medium says about that, because it's pretty important. So make sure you check out that video next week. Most likely, my mother and father were probably taking a whole pharmaceutical cocktail of drugs because of their mental illnesses. So when I was born, I definitely had toxins and viruses and all that kind of stuff, because you actually inherit these things from your parents' liver. So it's not so much that you inherit the diseases, you inherit the toxins and pathogens, and that's what causes the problems. So that's why it seems like people inherit the diseases, but really that's what causes it. The drugs actually definitely help with episodes, but I think it should be Western medicine's goal to get people off of these drugs, right? Because it's not great. Like, people have really bad side effects on these things. They always stop taking their medicine because of the side effects. And I mean, just to tell you, like, mental health and the Western medicine world, 50, 70 years ago, something like that, there were mental asylums. And if you know anything about that, or you see any of the Halloween stuff around all that kind of stuff, like, they did some insane things to these people. So, thank God we don't live in that time anymore. Kind of crazy how much things have advanced, but then again, how much they still don't know about mental health and wellness. I'm telling you all this is definitely still seek help, because the drugs could help you if you're dealing with an episode. However, medical medium does have some answers. So if you want to try this stuff, talk with your doctor about it. Maybe wean yourself off the drugs. Like, you can heal from this stuff. But the point of me telling you this is that I definitely inherited a lot of heavy metals and toxins just from knowing these two pieces of information, that they met in the hospital, so they're probably on pharmaceutical drugs, and also that they had mental health. So right then and there, that's heavy metals in the brain. And pharmaceuticals have a lot of stuff in them too that are not great. So just as a side note too, like I didn't know all of these details when I was younger because my mother and father really kind of protected me from this information, which I really, really am thankful for, because if I had known all this stuff about the mental health things and everything, I would have constantly been worried about like, what if I develop it and things like that, because that's, you know, what's known right now is it's inherited, so like what if, but then sometimes it doesn't manifest, so you know, I don't know. But I would have freaked out about that when I was younger if I had known earlier. So, I mean, when I was told, I learned as much as I could about it. I did AP Psych in high school because of that reason, like I wanted to learn about it. And so yeah, it was just very interesting. And I mean, science knows a lot, but they don't know exactly what causes these things. All of that background was just to prep you in the details that are going to follow, which is my benign tumor at birth. So when I was born, I actually had a tumor right here on my wrist. And if you can see, it's a little bit mushy. Like if you go on this side and try to do that, there's a bone there. Here, there's no bone, it's all squishy. And like if people are in front of me, I tell them to touch this spot first and then touch a spot, and you can feel the difference. I'm hoping that you can see it, because I mean, it's a video, so I don't know if you can see it or not. But basically, when I was born, I had a tumor, and my mother, remember, anytime I say mother, father, it's adopted mother, father. So my mother found this bump on my left wrist when I was a baby, and my mother and father searched for the best wrist surgeon, who actually ended up being Dr. Osterman, who I absolutely loved. But so they searched around for him, and they did a bunch of scans and tests, I'm assuming, and they determined it was a benign tumor and that they were going to take it out eventually. I don't know exactly what happened in the beginning, but I'm assuming that they did tests and monitored, and then around 5 or 6, I had my first surgery. So I don't have like too much recollection of, you know, getting scanned as a baby, but I do remember meeting with the doctor when I was like 5 or 6, and those doctor visits were very long. Like it was hours waiting in a waiting room for this doctor, which he was worth it, because I always remember my mom and dad making the time go by faster when we would play cards together. My dad would always play games and jokes. It was always, you know, I enjoyed this time with my parents, but at the same time, it was very long and exhausting. So there's that. Also, Dr. Osterman was he was such a nice doctor. His bedside manner was so nice. I always felt very comfortable. He's always made me laugh, so he was good with kids and older people. And I remember going in one day, you know, we've been talking and we know the surgery is coming up, and then he was like, tomorrow's the day. And my heart just sank. I'm like, oh my God, this is kind of a big deal. You know, what's going to happen? So I went to CHOP super early. If you've ever had surgery, you know that they ask you to come to the hospital at the butt crack of dawn. And so I went to CHOP, and I remember having these little like toys with the wood thing and the wire, and I was playing with that, and then they finally called my name, and they gave me some kind of cup of some liquid medicine, and I don't remember anything after that. Apparently I walked into a wall. No recollection of this at all, but you know, I was knocked out just from that. So honestly, I kind of like that. And they ended up removing a piece of the bone on the outside right here, and they got rid of the tumor. So I don't know exactly what else entailed of that whole tumor, but they also had to remove the tumor, because if they didn't, then I would have lost mobility in my wrist. And even at that, I still don't have the most, like, it's still not great, because I go like, I can't go out. Like, I used to cheer, and you're supposed, like a high V, your wrist is supposed to go out, and I can't turn it all the way. And then also I do dance, and like you're supposed to have the wrist face sideways, and again, it's not going. So we're working on it. I'm gonna like, I can't really work on it, to be honest. It's not gonna fix because I'm missing a piece, but I'm going to work on like a way to style that's a little different because I'm doing salsa dancing and it's so much fun. But anyway, going back to my story, the whole experience was very painful. And I remember, you know, as soon as I woke up, I felt really nauseous from the surgery. I threw up a lot. I think I spent at least 2 days just in bed. And then, because they kept me in the hospital for like 2 weeks to monitor me. Apparently they were trying out this new surgery technique for kids, and it was kind of experimental. And so I guess they wanted to monitor me for 2 weeks, which was okay, but like the hospital kind of sucks. And my parents were with me every night, which was amazing. They're like, my husband actually recently just got sick, and I hated staying overnight for a couple days after he had surgery, and like, I can't believe they stayed for a whole like, I don't think I was alone once. So when I woke up, I was in a lot of pain and I was very nauseous, and I had to stay in the hospital for about 2 weeks. Also, as a side note, they had to do the surgery because if they didn't do it, then I wouldn't have mobility in my wrist. So I don't have full mobility in my wrist. I actually, in cheerleading, we do a V, which is like this. And notice that this wrist is a lot further out than this wrist. It's kind of hard to see on the video, but I can't quite get this wrist all the way out. And then also in salsa, we do like styling. And notice that my hand, like, this is what it's supposed to look like on this side. And like, I can't get this side over. So I gotta like hide it somehow. Or maybe do one of these or something, because my wrist does not move that way. And, you know, the surgery was, I don't remember the actual surgery, but I do remember I had some pretty terrible dreams under anesthesia, and when I woke up, I felt terrible. You know, staying in the hospital for at least a week, maybe a couple. At one point, I was walking around and I went to the playroom with like the other children at the hospital, and I just remember feeling so sorry for them because they looked way worse off than I did, and you know, some of them couldn't even walk. They were just in a wheelchair and things. So I just was counting my blessings with that. And it's really sad to see so many people sick at such a young age. I always did also, so for part of the follow-ups, there was some pins that they had to take out. And they also had to take off the hard cast, which was terrifying. And the pins, one of them was actually stuck in my, I don't know what, bone, tissue, I don't know. But it was so painful getting it out. I screamed in the waiting room. And then also my thumb is all numb here too. Like, I wonder if that did anything, but who knows? I mean, they moved a bunch of stuff around for surgery. So after this first surgery, I actually was on a Pee Wee competition cheer team, and I could do a handstand and some other, you know, little things for tumbling that they were teaching us. And on one of the follow-up visits, I did the handstand for Dr. Osterman, and he just sung my praises to all of the nurses and was like, look at what she can do after the surgery and blah, blah, blah. So that was pretty cool. I will tell you that since that first surgery, you know, a couple years later, I broke it twice, you know, pretty much 2 years and then 2 years after that. And what I found out was that my arm breaks very easily. So like after that first break, I was terrified to do tumbling, skating, pretty much anything because it broke so easily. And the result of that was I had a long scar. It was only that long though. And then a zigzag. So it got cut up, like those were the same length, and then I had 2 pinholes. Okay, so, oh, and I have a little scar up here. I forgot about that one. So I got some scars. So next, I actually broke it twice, which I kind of talked about a little bit in the last section, but pretty much a few years, a couple, like not even that much. I was probably 7, maybe 8. I was just running down the street, and I fell, and my arm snapped in half. Now, usually when your arm breaks, that you just set it and then put a cast on it, and a couple months later, it's fine. Your bones mend and stuff. That didn't happen for me. Because I was missing a bone, It broke so badly that I needed to have another operation, and Dr. Osterman had to put plates and screws in the arm as a result. So, that first of all, breaking it was very painful. Driving in the hospital to get it checked was very painful. When they set it at the emergency room, they didn't give me any drugs. And I don't know, I mean, this was the 90s, so I don't know, but I was hard, like, what's the word? I was traumatized by that experience because they snapped it in place to set it, and I screamed. It hurt so bad. And I couldn't believe that's like, you have all this anesthesia to put you to bed for surgery. Why in God's name are you snapping my broken arm back? It was terrible. So they snapped it. I went to Dr. Osterman for a follow-up because that was the emergency room, so it wasn't him that said it, and he determined that I needed to have that surgery for the plates and screws. So this time I remember getting put down for the surgery, and the gas was disgusting. Like, I just remember hating it and like moving my head around because it smelled so bad. Eventually they put me out, and when I woke up, same kind of thing. Really nauseous, felt terrible, in a lot of pain. Surgery is not an easy thing. Also, as a side note, for some reason, redheads metabolize anesthesia faster. So one time I actually woke up during surgery, but that wasn't for the arm surgeries. It was for a different one. So I'll explain that another time. So for this surgery, my scar became wider, and so it became a little longer. And then a couple years later, I was probably 10, 11, I broke it again. This time I was skating, just roller skating around the neighborhood, and I remember my parents saying, like, be home by dusk, which is like nighttime, and I fell on the way home and snapped my arm in half. My parents were actually not home at the time, so I was just sitting at the kitchen table holding it, and I just remember thinking to myself, like, I was so scared that they would be upset that I was out at dusk, or, when it was becoming dusk. When really they were just concerned with my broken arm. They brought me to the hospital, all that good stuff. This time, though, they put me to sleep before they said it, which was, thank God, because it was terrible that first time. So they gave me a needle, and I was fighting it because I'm like, I don't even want to be thinking that I am, like, at wake at all. So, like, I was fighting it. Finally, they put me to sleep. And they said it. I woke up with a cast. Dr. Osterman ended up doing another surgery, and this time the scar was even longer, and of course feeling sick and all that stuff afterwards. And then finally the last surgery. So 4 surgeries in total. 1 when I was 5, then 2 for a broken arm, and then this last surgery actually happened in high school. So I was always seeing Dr. Osterman through visits because, I was growing and he wanted to make sure everything was working properly. So I was starting to complain about pains and stuff because it wasn't feeling great. So he mentioned that we could do an elective surgery to take out the plates and screws to make the bone stronger, and then that could help with the pains and stuff. So I hated surgery, and I had terrible experiences with it, so I kept putting that off because an elective surgery is optional and you don't have to do it. So I just kept putting it off. Then a few years later, I would actually move my thumb, and it would get stuck up. Like, it would, not like but I had to like move it down again because the tendons were actually getting stuck on a bone that was growing out, and it just, that happened. And the reason why it was growing out is because my other bone was missing. I had to have surgery again this time because the tendon was getting stuck, and if I didn't take care of it, that could eventually snap the tendon in the long run, and that would have been very painful. So I decided to do the surgery, and for this surgery, I was very concerned about the nausea and everything else, and they did a localized anesthetic, kind of like, when you get your teeth done and they do a localized needle and you can't feel anything. They did that for my whole arm, which was new technology, and it was I didn't feel sick, which was amazing. But there was a bad side too, so I'll get to that in a second. So before they brought me into surgery, they did give me a sedative to calm me down, and I was completely awake, getting rolled in. I couldn't feel my arm. I think the doctor asked me a couple questions about the arm and stuff, and I couldn't feel it at all. He went into there, and I started to hear, like, the saw and things. And I just remember, and I'm very anxious about this kind of stuff. So, like, I was on some kind of crazy drug. I don't even know what they gave me. But I just remember thinking to myself, like, I kind of want to see what it looks like. And then I immediately thought in my head, no, that's a terrible idea. What am I thinking? And I asked the anesthesiologist to put me down, because before I was rolled in, he actually told me, or she, I don't remember if it was a boy or girl, but they told me that if I wanted to be put asleep, that they had the ability to do that. So I asked them for me to be put asleep because, one, it was kind of crazy to hear all that stuff happening because he was literally sawing down my bone. And two, I just had some crazy thoughts in my head and I didn't want to have them anymore, so I just wanted to be put out. When I woke up, I was feeling the best I have out of any surgery I've ever had with Dr. Osterman. I wasn't feeling sick and all that kind of stuff. So that was a huge relief. They did come around and give me some Percocets, like, pretty much, I don't know, a couple hours in. So I don't know, this was a different experience because they didn't keep me for a couple days. They kind of kept me for a couple hours after surgery, and then I was sent home. They gave me the pain medicine, and they told me to take it with some crackers, but that pain medicine always made me feel sick, so I was kind of like putting it off. I didn't want to really eat anything because I was feeling okay and I didn't want to throw up. That was a mistake because literally within the hour I started feeling like what's it called, pins and needles, you know, like when you sleep on your leg, but it was on my surgery arm. Not a good thing. So I started feeling that even before I left the hospital, and I told the nurses that, and they said, oh, just take some more, pain medicine, you'll be fine. They sent me home, and I was on the couch crying most of that day because I was in so much pain after that anesthesia, that localized anesthesia wore off. Because they just sawed down my bone. Like, why didn't they give me more medicine? I don't know. But it was terrible. And I just cried and I couldn't move. And my mom, actually, she wasn't there the whole day. So, like, at one point, I was like, my cousin was helping me with pillows, I don't know. And then I think she did call, and I got some different medicine or stronger medicine. I don't remember, but it was not a good day. It was very, very painful. So, like, it was a good thing I wasn't nauseous, but I was in way more pain than I've ever been from any surgery ever, which was terrible. So that surgery actually happened at the end of my high school career, and I just remember being on these pain medicines, like, through graduation and the yearbook signing, and I, like, went up to people I usually probably wouldn't have had the guts to go up to sign my yearbook. So that happened. So yeah, I'll always remember that. It was just it was an intense time. It's an interesting story. People are always amazed when I tell them all that stuff, but, it was very painful too. And next week I'm going to tell you why this probably happened, because my whole life they always just said, oh, we don't know. Luck of the draw, who knows? And I kept asking God too, like, why me? Why do I have to have this surgery? Blah, blah, blah. And then that's when I went into the hospital and saw all those other kids, and I was like, oh my God. So, yep, wasn't too bad compared to other people. So that's my story. Hope you guys liked it. Make sure you stay tuned and like and subscribe to learn more, because I got a lot more coming. Have a good one. Bye.